Now, with your newfound knowledge of what exactly an object is in Blender, let's go ahead and solidify this idea of the origin point and figure out what exactly the 3D cursor is and the global and local space. This is going to be quite a big one, but trust me, this is what's going to make or break your journey in Blender, because truly this here is a powerhouse tool set to understand. So first, let's go into edit mode. So pressing tab, we're going to select everything with A, press G, and we'll just move it off to the side. Now don't worry, we're going to get into precision real soon, but we need to truly understand this because, like I just said, this is a powerhouse to understand. Once you've grasped this, you've basically understood the fundamentals of Blender. Let's go back into object mode by pressing tab, and now, as I've said before, that little orange dot, that is your origin point. Now why is it the origin point? Because it is the origin of all of the transforms happening to this object. As you see, as I rotate it, it is literally using that point as its pivot point. It can be such a powerful tool. In fact, it's even more obvious when I scale, it is scaling to and from that point. So just keep that in mind. Okay, but now that we know that that's so powerful, how do I move that precisely somewhere? Because if I have to go into edit mode every single time and move the mesh and then move all that, no, there's a lot to this. And first, let me show you a weird way. But I'm showing you this weird way on purpose because then you're going to understand something called the local space. So we're going to go here to Tool, and we're going to go to Effect Only and click Origins. Now, with your cube selected, you'll see all of a sudden your origin point has some axis lines on it. This has its Y, its X, and its Z. This is the local space of your object. Let me reiterate that. This green line here, the one that's going in that direction, that is the global Y. But to the cube, and as we have our origin currently rotated a little bit, because we rotated the entire object just now, the local is that way. Okay. Now, we'll cover that in a little bit more. Let me just finish off with the 3D cursor and we'll come back to this whole global and local space. So now that we have this like that, the reason why we've gone to effect only is if I press G now, I can now move just the origin point. And then when you learn about snapping, you can snap with this, but it's a little bit counterintuitive. I prefer to use the 3D cursor. So I'm going to right click to cancel this, and also another thing, when you're in effect only, you can't change things with this here. So let's use the 3D cursor here. Now, I'm going to go and turn off this effect only of origins, and let's talk about that 3D cursor. Right here, I've mentioned it before, it is so incredibly powerful because in the 3D space, we have a 2D mouse. That's not very useful. How can I say, hey, that face right there, that's where I want to be? Well, with a 2D mouse, you can't, but with a 3D mouse, you can. So to move the 3D cursor, you can click this right here, and then you can click and drag, and that moves the 3D cursor. Personally, I don't use it. What I use is the shortcut, which is Shift and right click, and that moves the 3D cursor. And then you can also project it to a point, and you can snap it to a point, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But to project it, hold down Shift, then just right click, and it's going to project itself to that point. And as you see, it is projected itself to the face there. Now, I am wanting to get my origin point to that 3D cursor, and I can do that because the 3D cursor basically represents an exact point that I want it to be at. So I'm going to go here to the object menu, and all of these operations that I'm showing, by the way, are all here. There's a lot of them. But just be aware that here we've got it. We've got the lovely transform one, set origin, which is exactly what we're wanting. There's also the snap one that we're going to go and look at. But here we go, set origin. We've got origin to 3D cursor, geometry to the origin to geometry, and a whole bunch of other ones. We're going into that menu every time, and this is really annoying to do that. I don't want to do that. What I want to show you is something called a context menu. And all you have to do is right click. Now the context menu changes contextually to whichever workspace you're in. Currently we're in the object workspace, so this is the object context menu, and here you'll find the most used commands, one of them being set origin. And here we're going to set the origin to the 3D cursor, and there we have it. The origin point is now where the 3D cursor is, and as you would expect, if I rotate right now, it's going to rotate right there on that origin point. Okay, now you can start to see how powerful this combination is. But what if I want to move the 3D cursor back to the 0, 0, and I want to keep my origin there, but I want to rotate from here? Well, you can do that with a 3D cursor. It's an incredibly versatile tool. So we know to move the 3D cursor, hold down Shift, right click, and we try and get it that way. Not exactly precise. So let me show you some other ways of moving that 3D cursor. You can go over to View, and here there will be the 3D cursor transforms, and is the location and rotation of it. Because if we rotate around, you can see that the 3D cursor goes at an angle there, and sometimes you don't want it at an angle, so we'll set all these to 0, and now it's going to be set up and down on the XY global space. Okay, now that we've done that, let's move that 3D cursor to the 0, 0. Rather than going here, you can go either to Object and Snap, and there's a whole bunch of snappings here, but I want to show you a little hidden menu. I don't know why it doesn't show the shortcut right here, but it's Shift S. Shift S brings up that snapping menu, and it's a very powerful menu. One of the key things on here is you can bring your selection to the 3D cursor. You can also bring the cursor to the selection. You can also bring your cursor to the world origin. Now the world origin is the global space, and I'm going to click here. Global space, that 0, 0, where that lines of the axes converge. There we have it. Okay, now I want to use that point there as the rotation point rather than setting the origin point over there. Up here at the top, you're going to find the pivot point menu. So this is the transform of pivot points. There's a whole bunch here. Right this minute, we're just going to concentrate on the 3D cursor one. I'm sure you'll play around with the other ones in the future. So this 3D cursor one, rather than using this one, I want to show you the shortcut as well, which is point on your keypad, not the numpad, and that brings up the pivot point pie menu. And I want this to be the 3D cursor. I'll click there, brilliant. I'm now going to rotate, and you'll see that it is rotating from the 3D cursor. Okay, so now that we have this rotated in some amount there, let's talk about this global and local space. Okay, let's first change this back to what it is, which is normally the median point is the default here. Now we have our object selected. When we press G and we move things, it is technically freeform movement. When we constrain it once on the Y, we are now in global. Take a look at the top left. It says along global Y. Now if I press Y once again, it's now along the local Y. Now do you remember why that is the case? I'm going to right click to cancel this movement. We're going to click, make sure that that's on that object. We're going to go to Tool. We're going to go to Effect Only Origins so we can see the axes of the origin point. Now the origin point is the local space for that object. The global space is all the other 3D environment around. So that's what I'm trying to put across here, that this object has its own orientation, and then inside of its own orientation, it is inside of the global space. And now, I'm sorry, this is going to probably melt your head just a little bit. We're going to click this object. We're going to press Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to press G, and we're going to go Z up just a little bit. Then I'm going to press G, and we're going to press Y. Now we are along the global. Now if we wanted to move along the local, so the object Y, we would press Y once again, and we would move along that one right there. Now this can get a little bit weird when you have rotations that don't quite look right. For instance, if I press R now and I rotate this on the Z by some weird amount like so, you would think, oh, okay, I want to move this way. Well, currently the local space has not changed because you've just changed the mesh. And remember, the mesh is the thing inside of the object. So the local space is just the orientation of the box. The mesh itself doesn't actually have an orientation at all. So if I press G, Y, and Y, it's going to move to its local. And by the way, now if you press Y once again, it goes back to that freeform movement. Okay, that there was a lot to take in, and I hope it made sense. Now that there was a lot to take in, but trust me when I say this, understanding objects fundamentally, the global and local space, origin points, and 3D cursor usage is truly a powerhouse combination that makes everything in Blender so much easier and so much more usable once you get your head around it.